Have you ever heard of the AquaDesk? It's like if you had a table, but instead of the top, it was just a fish tank. Well, frankly, I haven't heard of that either because it's not something that actually exists. Nevertheless, ChatGPT came up with this concept when I challenged it to come up with a new idea. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's not a new idea. You prompted it and it's just combining a bunch of stuff that was fed into it during its training. And it doesn't even understand what any of these concepts actually are. But here's the thing, isn't that how we come up with new ideas too? And how much does understanding actually play a role in all of this? Later in the video, we're going to take a look at how people come up with some new ideas and how the AI actually compares to that. But before we do that, let's first talk about how the human brain learns and how that compares to the AI. The human brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. These are cells responsible for processing and transmitting information. These neurons communicate with each other through connections called synapses, which allow electrical and chemical signals to flow from one neuron to another. As we experience the world around us, these neural connections are constantly being activated in response to our environment and our senses. The path that the signals take is shaped by many factors, such as previous experience, memories, and even the substances that we consume. The activation of these neurons working together results in us experiencing thoughts, forming memories, learning, and actually taking actions. Over time, these connections can strengthen or weaken in a process known as synaptic plasticity. And just like a well-worn path becomes more defined with every step, frequently used synapses strengthen the connection between the different neurons. Forming these connections in turn helps us identify patterns in the world and process information more efficiently. Interestingly, our current scientific understanding of the brain suggests that when we experience memories, we are simply experiencing the brain replaying an activation of a series of neurons. So when we think about learning and memories, what we're really talking about is the weights and connections between all of these different neurons that develop over time. Now, let's compare this to how artificial intelligence models such as GPT-4 actually learn. These models are trained on large data sets, giving them a lot of examples to extract patterns from and learn. The training process involves adjusting connections between artificial neurons similar to how our brains update connections based on our experiences. There are certainly significant differences in the data that we learn from and that AI learns from. We experience a plethora of senses: sight, hearing, taste, internal senses too, like hunger. AI models, on the other hand, are generally trained with a predefined dataset and a specific purpose in mind, such as generating images or creating text. Nonetheless, the fundamentals of learning remain very similar. In both cases, connections between neurons are created and tuned through observing significant amounts of data, and they are then used to create future responses. The algorithm used to tune and adjust the connections in our brain is really written in our DNA. On the other hand, the algorithm for the AI is written as code. The process of learning and forming new ideas in both humans and AI is fundamentally based on our ability to identify patterns and connections within the existing information. When we encounter something new, our brains try to make sense of it by connecting it to something that we already know. The new stimulus activates certain neurons, which in turn activate other neurons. Because the activation pathways are often established from our previous experiences, we're generally able to relate a new stimulus to those previous experiences. As all of these experiences add up and change the weights and connections in our neurons, this constitutes our full set of personal training data. So what happens when we try to think of something new? We're once again activating a series of neurons, typically with a particular goal in mind, whether that goal is conscious or subconscious. Some sort of stimulus prompts us to think, and this could be something that we see, hear, or just chemical changes in our body or our brain. This prompting stimulus makes our neurons activate in ways that are most likely to help us achieve a desirable outcome. And in many ways, we are limited by the connections that we have learned up until that point. So to illustrate my point, consider this. When you hear someone come up with a brand new idea, it may seem very original to you, But from the perspective of the person actually creating that idea, it was just a matter of connecting several ideas and concepts that they were already familiar with, and of course, being prompted by their surroundings in a meaningful way. And this is precisely what ChatGPT does when it generates a new idea. It has been trained on an enormous amount of data, which it has processed and organized into a complex network of associations, just like our own neurons. When prompted with a topic or question, the model takes this new stimulus and allows it to go through its trained neural network. The prompt activates various artificial neurons within the AI model and results in a unique output which utilizes that learned experience of the model to arrive at a new response. So when ChatGPT comes up with the AquaDesk, it's not pulling that idea out of thin air, it's doing exactly what our own brains do, taking pre-existing concepts like the fish tank and a table and combining them in a novel way. The same process really that underlines our own creativity. When we have a groundbreaking idea, it's not because we've invented something totally new, but because we've connected pre-existing ideas in a unique way. But don't just take my word for it. Let's run a little experiment in divergent thinking, an exercise often used to evaluate creativity in people. It works like this. We pick an item, and a person has to come up with as many creative uses for it as possible within a set amount of time. Typically, the item is going to be something pretty common, such as a brick, but I wanted to make sure that we avoided any chance of the AI having direct solutions for it in the training data. So I picked an item I did not see any alternative uses for online, and yes, this was very hard. So let's see how many uses people can think of for the interdental brush. So I'm going to give you an item, and you have to come up with as many unique uses for it as you can. Here's the item. It is an interdental brush. What uses can you come up with?
Well, I could clean my teeth with it. I could clean my nose with it. I could clean my corners of my eyes with it.
You can clean. I guess you could also write with it if you dipped it in ink. You can dust with it. I guess you could floss with it too.
I'd probably use this for texture and painting.
Oh, cool.
I can brush my hair with it.
Okay, so you could definitely clean other things with this.
Very true.
Like a pipe cleaner situation. I feel like you could get in like keyboards and stuff.
Just thinking keyboards.
Oh man, you could like use it to like reach little things.
I'd say mustache. One of those big mustache brush.
I mean, I can only really think of one. I mean, cleaning teeth.
I could put it in a straw and blow it as a blow dart and probably kill a rabbit with it.
The lid can like have like other little small things in it, you know, like,
True.
I don't know, you can put little beads in it and stuff. Cut it and maybe make like a necklace out of it.
Like if you had a little hamster or a little pet mouse, you could use this to brush their hair.
I'd clean my AirPods with it. Like I'd stick it in between the thing, and obviously use it for my teeth.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Do you use this for your ears as well or not?
Sure.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. And
Probably
also,
just getting through small places, like stuff that you couldn't reach, to, like
Maybe
in
some
between
cracks.
your phone, like your phone crack.
and also like maybe some cracks through the windows, you know, just get that out of you.
And then I don't know. I can't really think of anything else. But
Yeah,
yeah.
that's all I got.
Cool, well thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, that was really fun. It was really cool to hear all of the creative uses that people could come up with. And while there was some overlap, because I think people tend to associate the item with a certain set of uses, there were also some really unique ideas out there. So let's see what ChatGPT can come up with and how that list will compare to this one. Okay, here we go. Create 20 alternative uses for the interdental brush. Okay, so we definitely see ChatGPT come up with some similar answers in terms of using it to clean keyboards or using it for fine art, but we also see some really creative answers such as using it as an herb aerator as well as a scientific sampling tool to collect small amounts of substances. The responses from both people and ChatGPT show us that coming up with new ideas is really a matter of connecting separate ideas into something new. So clearly the AI was able to come up with some creative uses for the interdental brush, but you might say, well, it can't come up with anything outside of its training data. And that's true, to a degree. It's important to note that both humans and AI are limited by the information that we've been exposed to. Neither of us can generate truly novel ideas completely outside of the context of our own experience and knowledge. But just as humans can learn and incorporate new information, AI models can also be updated or prompted with additional data. Engineering teams are actively working on giving AIs the ability to retrieve necessary information as needed, and future AI models are likely to have even more dynamic learning capabilities, such as neuron weights that adjust over time in response to new inputs, further mirroring the human learning process. But what about understanding? Does AI even understand any of these things that it is generating? Here's the problem with that. How do we know that people actually understand what we are talking about? I mean, have you ever met somebody who's claimed to understand something, but they really have no idea what they're talking about? Understanding isn't black and white. There's a lot of nuance to it. Like when we think that we understand something, what we really mean is that we have this sense that certain neural connections have been made in relation to a particular concept. This gives us a way to think about that concept and apply it in many different situations. A poor understanding of a subject would be represented by a limited set of those connections and an inability to think about that subject in various different ways. On the other hand, a strong understanding of the subject would allow you to apply it in many different situations. AI has a similar abstract understanding of various concepts, which is represented in all of the connections and weights within its artificial neurons. In this way, human understanding and AI understanding may not be as different as it might seem on the surface. Both involve complex patterns of connections between these different processing units, which in one case are biological neurons, and in the other case are artificial ones. But does AI even need to understand in the same way that we do for the output that it generates to be considered as a new idea? I would argue that it doesn't. Even if an AI model is simply identifying patterns and making connections without any deeper understanding, the end result can still be a truly novel and original creation. A toaster still creates toast despite not knowing what it is doing. That doesn't make the toast any less real. When it comes to evaluating an entity's ability to create something, it's the output that matters, not the inner experience of the entity generating it. This brings us to the next problem of consciousness. We often associate understanding and creativity with consciousness, that subjective experience of being aware, having thoughts and feelings. But the truth is, consciousness is one of the biggest mysteries in the world. We don't really know what it is, how it arises, or even how to definitively test for its presence. We generally assume that other people are conscious because we know we are ourselves, and that seems like a reasonable assumption, but how can we be fundamentally certain? And what about animals, plants, or even systems like AI? The truth is, we simply don't know. It's entirely possible that AI models are experiencing some form of consciousness even if it is very different from our own. And it's also possible that they are simply complex systems without any experience at all. Yet it does beg the question of what makes us different, because we are also physical systems made out of physical substance. Ultimately though, I don't think the question of consciousness is critical to whether an AI can actually create new ideas. Even if an AI model doesn't have conscious experience or understand what it is creating, they are still capable of generating new combinations of concepts in ways that can be useful, insightful, and even creative. So, if AI can connect concepts in unique ways to create ideas that appear new to us, does it even matter what is happening under the hood and whether the AI experiences or understands these things as we do? Is creativity something that only we are capable of? Or is it perhaps just one expression of a more universal generative process, one that we happen to share with our artificial creations? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.